Welcome back to the channel. Some of you will notice that I'm not in the usual space, I'm not in my spare bedroom. I've taken myself down to a local rehearsal space because I want to show you a new amplifier. It's this Ashdown SX5C, a 5-watt combo amp that is packed full of stuff. Even though it is just a 5-watt combo, it's still pretty loud. So I thought the best way to show it to you guys was take it somewhere else, crank it, and hear what it's got to offer. Crucially, without annoying any neighbors. Speaking of which, let's turn it up all the way just to start off the video and see how loud this does get. Classic low wattage valve amp, kind of crisp and sizzle that sounds excellent. And so to answer your first question straight off in this video, is it loud enough to gig? Absolutely, but you're not going to get clean headroom from this thing. It is crispy, it is driven, and it sounds luscious in that sense, but you're not going to get cleans from it. Not at that volume anyway. So we know Ashdown as a legendary bass manufacturer, but they've almost always, don't quote me on that, had at least one or two options for us guitarists as well. The latest range of valve amps from Ashdown are called the SX range. This 5C being the little baby from that lineup. Now, usually when a amp manufacturer has a line of amps, usually the lowest wattage, the smallest one, has a more stripped back feature set, which isn't actually really the case with this Ashdown amp. They've still packed a hell of a lot of stuff into this amp that maybe you wouldn't expect from not only a small 5-watt amp like this, but also an amp that costs £650. The 5C is a single channel tube amp with a really tasty digital reverb, kind of springy, kind of hauly. You can definitely hear it do those fluttery, splashy sounds. I think it's really nice for a digital reverb. It features JJ Electronics tubes, an ECC83 preamp tube, and an EL84 power valve. Full bass, mid, and treble controls, which is an interesting thing for a 5-watt amp, I think. Master volume with a stealth and speaker mute switch, which are both really cool features. An effects loop, a 12-inch Celestion speaker, which again I think is great on a little 5-watt amp, really helps it be a more giggable option. We have a recording out, which actually has an EQ profile filter on it to sound like that Celestion speaker. A headphone option so you can practice at home, as well as aux-in capabilities to play along with your favorite tracks. The feature list is really extensive, so on paper, this kind of sounds like a no-brainer, but none of that really matters unless the core sound isn't good. So let's carry on with some tones. We'll mess around with a few different gain levels, with the EQ as well, and see where we end up. So this is where we are at the moment. Everything roughly at 12 o'clock. the core tone good? Yes, it sounds good. I think it has its limitations. Really, that's down just the fact that it is a small wattage amp. That's to be expected. But if you're looking for edge of breakup to medium gain as your amp tone, this is really, really nice. Personally, I would say that the 3-band EQ is a little bit overkill. Maybe just a bass and treble or even a master tone where maybe would have been more suited to a 5-watt combo. But am I really going to be taking away features at this point? Probably not. It's nice to have. With the master at halfway, I think we are just about giggable level, and cranking the master further than that, really we're just pushing the amp a little harder. Maybe not getting so much more volume, we're just pushing the amp harder. Let's switch guitars and we will go through a few more features. The amp doesn't have a standby switch, by the way, but it does have a speaker mute, which is useful for not only practicing at home with headphones, but also changing guitars. Okay, let's play some single coils, see what clean sounds we can get out of it, and also play around with that reverb a little more. So I am actually gonna make use of that 3-band EQ. I'm gonna scoop the mids, pump the bass and treble a little bit just to get a bit more of the Fendery sound maybe. Let's hear the reverb up all the way, but it is pretty washy. That's a really interesting reverb. It's not a typical amp style reverb. Like cranking it all the way, that could almost be in a pedal in itself. It's really washy, splashy, almost sounds like it's got a bit of modulation on it. But when you do have it turned down low, it is a nice amp style reverb. So with single coils, you can definitely get great, clean, stratty, edge of breakup tones. Not quite clean, I guess, but that sounds great on a Strat. I love this. I really like this amp with the gain at about 10, between 10 and 11 o'clock. That seems to get the best of both worlds, where if you dig in, you can get it to drive, but backing off with single coils, it's definitely cleaner. Let's mess around with this stealth switch. Now, the stealth switch is a really useful feature for people at home. It basically drastically reduces the volume of your amp and puts a bit of a filter on top of that sound, so the amp still sounds like it's driving hard, but at a lower volume. That's at least half the volume of, like, when it's not engaged. That's incredibly useful if you ask me. One feature that I would like to show you, but it might actually be best if I take it home and demonstrate it to you, is that record out feature as well, with the filter, profile, EQ basically of the Celestion speaker, so you can record direct at home. Let's go home and we'll check out that feature and come back here later. Okay, so that was the record out of the 5C. I have some thoughts. Would I necessarily record an album with that tone or a pedal demo? No, I probably wouldn't. I don't think it's quite up to scratch for that sort of thing. But as just a way to quickly lay down some ideas or test out some stuff, I think that is really a really valuable feature. And also for those people who aren't able to, you know, put a microphone in front of their amp or don't have the other gear to necessarily get a load from the amp and, you know, use an external IR, I think that is a superb feature. Okay, let's go back to the rehearsal studio and we'll hear this amp a bit more under a microphone. Maybe one more thing to look at is how well it takes pedals. That is something to consider when looking at a small wattage amp, because they do naturally have less headroom, which is a cool sound, but maybe that means it doesn't take pedals so well. So I've got a fuzz pedal, an overdrive, and a delay on the floor. Maybe we'll mess around with a mixture of these tones and we'll see how well it takes pedals. Certainly sound good in the front end. Bearing in mind we are going in the front end, there is an effects loop. I'm not using it. I'm not an effects loop kind of guy. And they sound good. The delay still had character and still was clear enough. But when we used it with the fuzz, then things did start to mush up a little bit. But you know what? For me, that's the sound within itself. I dig that. You know what? I think this is an amp that maybe on paper seems like it's over-delivering. You know, it's a 5-watt combo with a whole host of features, and maybe that would have been hard to pull off, but I do think Ashdown have managed to do it. It's just about loud enough to gig if you want a more dirty tone. In fact, it's definitely loud enough to gig if you want a dirty tone. Cleaner tones, if you're a funk player, this isn't the amp for you, but you probably already know that. You need a higher headroom amp. So yeah, that has been the Ashdown Amps SX5C. If you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you would go and subscribe to the channel and maybe watch another video. I'm shooting a few more videos in this space with a few more cool amps, so stick around for those. Thanks guys, and I'll see you in the next one.